I want to begin by saying that Lisa Smith did all of the interviews for this material. And where's Lisa?
Right.
Yeah, okay, just so everybody knows that. And my role here has been mostly to sit and read her transcripts and think about them, and then we've been discussing them. So I want to begin by telling you, aside from the fact that this is going to be totally different than Heather's, since this is all qualitative, and that I am something of a newbie to employment as an issue. And I think that that has certain advantages, because I come at this with a certain naivete about what the possibilities are, and I'm not quite inclined to accept that this ain't going to work, which is, I'm afraid, the way many people see the matter. Supported employment was basically developed for people coming out of state hospitals in the 1970s and 80s, and nobody assumed that the prospects were terribly good. We assumed that if we could get them any sort of employment, that would be great. You know, this was employment for people coming out of the state hospitals was, let's get them something to do. Now, for young adults who don't have this long history of mental health services, who can potentially live a full employment career. And the point I want to make is that I think there's a potential here in employment services, not just to think about having people chronically on disability and working part-time and episodically, but to really have careers. And what we've been finding in our in some of the work we've been doing at UMass and the RTC is that young adults really seem to have goals of wanting to be full participants in the employment market. Okay, so we got interested in the employment market for young adults. What are the barriers to full-time employment, how we might improve that sort of system. And so here's what IPS, which is the standard for employment services for people with mental illness. It has 10 key features. I'm going to basically talk about rapid job search is one of those. Job development, which we'll talk a lot about, individualized long-term supports, and benefit counseling. So we set out to sort of try to get a comprehensive picture of the employment services, simply with a small sample but in-depth interviewing. And so we figured we do 10 people with mental illness who've been employed and have succeeded in getting out of part-time temporary employment and build careers. We wanted to do 10 employment specialists because Lisa got so interested we ended up doing 12 of them. We wanted to do 10 employers, of which we're still in the middle of doing for a variety of reasons having to do with the bureaucracy of IRBs. But what I want to talk today is just about the 12 interviews with employment specialists. So in marked contrast to Heather, this is a small sample, okay, but lots of detail. So I'm going to sit here and talk, and you're going to read the interesting material on the screen, okay? So the first thing is what do young adults want? Well, at least from the perspective of the employment specialists, they want something that is meaningful, and they want something that looks like a career. I think that by and large, the young adults with mental health issues are looking for the same thing most of the rest of the population is, which is, want to live a nice middle-class life in the suburbs with 2 1/4 kids and, 3 cars and a pickup truck, right? I'm being only slightly sarcastic, but, they want a career. They want to have meaningful work, okay? So what are the barriers to this? Well, the thing that came up over and over and over is stigma. And these are just quotes from a few employment staff people, and how they go out and they do job development. Well, what do I say I'm doing? They don't say, I have a bunch of people here who are mentally ill who want jobs. They say, well, the first person here says, well, I don't necessarily market it as a program. We talk about people with disabilities. And the second person says, well, I don't want to talk about disabilities. That's too stigmatizing. We talk about people with varying abilities, So it's it's suggesting that these people who are, dealing with the employers firsthand are really seeing the reaction when they say they're working with people with mental illness. That isn't something you want to do. So that's a serious issue, and it's not been an issue that we're going to deal with right away, but we can't talk about employment without recognizing this. The rest of the country, outside of this room and their colleagues, think that mental illness is this terrible thing that's going to lead everybody to shoot everybody else, because that's what you see on television, right? But there are some other things. Mental health system schedules. You can't work full-time during the day and have a mental and deal with the mental health system, because the mental health system doesn't provide services at night or early in the morning. The services are provided in the middle of the day, and if you're going to get services, you're going to not work full-time, at least not during the day in the week. So as this interviewee says, they start having some availability problems. The other thing, I probably am not telling you guys anything you don't know already, but it comes up time and time again. People keep getting told, people with mental illness keep getting told, don't risk your benefits, don't risk your benefits, don't risk your benefits. So, don't work more than 20 hours a week, because if so, you're going to lose your benefits. And, look, God knows I'm not suggesting that we ought to do away with SSDI or SSI. What I am suggesting is that we need to stop, and I'm talking about mental health professionals, we need to stop telling people that, your life is at risk if you temporarily lose your benefits because you're actually going out and working. And it's, of course, it's the families, but it's also the mental health professionals. And this is what we heard time and time again from the employment specialists is, my colleagues are getting in the way. We're specifically interested in young adults, right? And so we were interested in what they had to say about, employment for young adults. And they certainly saw some advantages. I like this person, ES12. That's, I have, these little numbers at the bottom there, so you can, I'm not trying to give you people's names, but at least you know somehow they're connected. They haven't picked up a lot of bad habits. They haven't, they can learn how to do things right. If they're given the right support, if they have the right type of employment situation. And of course, as those of us in the RTC have learned, our young adults actually know something about technology. They don't behave like I do when I get up here and can't even make PowerPoint work, much less the other things. So that is a real employment advantage that they have. Now, the other side of things is, they do lack skills. You come out of high school particularly, but even you come out of college, and knowing how to function in the workplace is a little bit of a challenge. Then, of course, some subset of the people who these employment specialists are working with are like this person ES7 describes. Many of the people haven't gone to a traditional school or had traditional upbringing, so they don't have a lot of soft skills that are necessary. Many of our guys are terrible with scheduling. They have impulse problems, learning disabilities, educational deficits. They don't have role models. They don't know what it's like to work. So, I'm not suggesting here that this is a simple problem. I'm not that stupid. I am naive and optimistic about how things can be better, but I'm not stupid. So one of the more interesting things about, supported employment as a model puts a lot of emphasis on job development as the task for the employment staff. Okay, so ES12, who's actually a supervisor, describes this rather well when she says that they're spending 70% of their time going out and working in the community and basically doing job development. Now, when we talk to the employment specialists, however, there's a less enthusiastic picture of this. ES3, I mostly work with individuals, helping them try to find their own jobs. ES9, in the time I've been here, at least 2 jobs that people have gotten were because of development. And that's probably about it. And then she goes on and says, well, that neither of those actually worked, so the jobs I developed there don't work anymore because they had a bad experience with my clients. And of course they talk about the sort of difficulties they have doing this, where the people they meet with are change from time to time, so they think they built up this nice relationship with the employer, and then the next time they're starting over again. But a great deal of what they were telling us was that employment at this point all goes through online job applications. So the whole model that was built up in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, where you'd have somebody who would go out and develop jobs, isn't working very well, because they keep hearing, well, sure, that sounds really good. Have them apply online. And then, what have you done? You've said, hi, I'm here. Anyway, so we heard that over and over again. Well, Lisa heard that over and over again. I didn't hear any of this, so that's... So there's another problem here that struck me, and this is the sociologist talking, but you know, they're building these relationships with employers, and you know, they want to have good relationships with the employer, so they've got to give them the best person they've got. So the model that goes with IPS particularly of, you know, rapid placement for everybody. You know, everybody should be working, everybody should, well, from the employment specialist point of view, it doesn't work that way, because I've got to have this good relationship. I've got to prove to the employer that this is going to work. So if I take somebody who is seriously depressed or who is having cognitive troubles, and I send them out as my first person with a particular employer, I'm going to have trouble. I'm not going to get a second chance. So now then there's the problem which goes like this. What type of jobs are we developing? And it turns out what we're developing is entry-level jobs with no future. And you get a few quotes there about that one. Then there's, you know, we're supposed to be doing job supports, and this, so that's, you know, both with the employer and with the employee. Okay? Well, what it turns out is that, well, in this particular quote, which I just kind of thought was interesting, it's a little bit atypical, but what the specialist here was saying is, you know, when I went with this client to the employer, that just made it look more like this was a disabled person who wasn't going to be able to manage it at all. So I was doing a disservice. I wasn't helping. Whoops. You know, Lisa asked him, do employers ever call you and want to solve a problem with you? No. So have you had a young adult in a job where an employer actually used you as a support person? Me, personally, no, I haven't had an employer, but once someone working, I helped an individual, but no. So there are some strengths to the supported employment thing. The immediacy of, I mean, particularly for young adults who all of the employment specialists talked about, they're being impatient to get a job. They wanted to do that now, and that's really built into the supported employment model. The weakness, immediacy. And many of the people aren't ready to do it. They need more education. They need better training. So I have some conclusions here, and I did present this as, you know, I am something of an outsider to this field. But I think that traditional job development has become essentially irrelevant, and it's not helping with the career development. That's partly the online processes, it's partly centralization of hiring policy, which we didn't talk about much. And that these are entry-level jobs with no futures that are largely being developed. Many young adults want careers. We ought to be thinking more and attending more to supported education or to supported apprenticeships, because we need to remember that not everybody ends up in white-collar professions. And the rapid employment is important. Colleen McKay over there is developing a supported internship idea, which I think has some promise to it. And so the second conclusion is, you know, SSI is a really great thing, but it does have the problem that if we use it in instead of encouraging people to employ. That's a real problem. And I've now probably used up all of our time. What do I have? Another. I get 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, a few minutes for questions.
Questions, comments, whatever you'd like to do. It just blows your slide there.
We're going to call it Gremlin Heather.
I work for a state department of education, and there is an initiative called Employment First. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's talking about doing exactly what you're saying. It's allowing people with disabilities to encouraging their teams to look at employment is the only option, not a possibility.
It's wonderful to be a critic, which is what I can be here because I don't actually have to figure out how to do it. And I do sort of have the feeling that, we do need tremendously to experiment here and not to get into, IPS is a great service and they've done wonderful stuff. It's not working adequately for young adults. We have to keep experimenting. We've got to get out of this. This is the evidence-based practice, so everybody has to do it like this. We just need to be more, we need to get beyond that.
If you don't mind, just a nuance to that is that IPS may be good for a subgroup of young adults. The young adults are very diverse in all of these, and trying to attain further education and the types of jobs they may want, and that it's likely that it will be effective for some young adults. What we really don't understand is for whom it works, for whom it doesn't, and for those for whom it doesn't, what is it that really works for them? As we were talking about in the plenary this afternoon.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's, I'm sitting up here talking in great generalities, and that's one of the virtues that one has as a researcher. When you're a clinician, you actually have to deal with real cases sitting in front of you. And anyway.
In the presentation, you spoke about some of the difficulties of the entry-level jobs and some of the discontents around putting people in those jobs. Do you have any ideas about how those jobs might be reframed or retrained around to give the recipients of these jobs and occupants of these jobs a different perspective on them?
I think there's really nothing wrong with starting with an entry-level job for many people because you do have to learn how to work in a real work environment. And I remember myself in my first couple jobs and some of the things I did, and I go back and think, my God, why did they put up with me? So there's something to learning about that, but I think what you're suggesting is completely right, that we need to think about ways of taking that into a career. And I think the sort of internship model is an interesting one, in part because it's so normal. These young adults, their peers are out having internships and learning how to do this. And maybe it's just a touch less stigmatizing, and almost anything we can do to reduce the stigma seems to me to be a plus. I suspect I ought to shut up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.